King Law Halloween edition. We're going to talk about Lizzie Borden. Basically, everyone knows the ghost story surrounding Lizzie Borden, but does anyone really know what happened during the trial, which might be even more spookier than her ghost. So. True. We have Trisha Green here. She's our newest attorney to King Law, and we're excited to have you on.
Thank you.
Are you ready to talk about Lizzie Borden?
I think I am. So okay. I work in mass torts here, but I started my legal career in criminal defense as a public defender, and I also did a lot of Innocence Project work when I was a law student. So I'm very excited to get back into old murders unsolved question mark.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Everyone knows the famous poem surrounding Lizzie Borden. It goes, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41, which is actually not the case. So that is not what happened. So we're going to get into that. Let's go through kind of the background information of what was going on here. Lizzie Borden, she was born, Sarah being her mother, who passed away when she was 3. So Andrew, the father of Lizzie, remarried to a woman named Abby. And Abby is now the stepmother of Andrew's 2 children, Emma and Lizzie. So Lizzie has a pretty decent relationship, it sounds like, with her stepmother until a certain point where she then says that is Mrs. Borden and stops referring to her as mother. So there's a little bit of different hiccups that go along within this family over the course of time. There's some financial ruckus, which to do with the house. You were telling me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so at one point, the dad bought his wife and her sister a house so that they could have that no matter what happened. They would inherit that free and clear, and that upset Lizzie and her sister.
Yes. It also is known that Andrew was, he basically was a penny pincher. It sounds like they had money, but he wasn't always willing to share it or was going to, pick the cheaper option. So I know that there was a discussion about the area that they lived in and some financial issues about the house and what would happen to the house, if he should ever pass away or who it would be left to. Leading up to the murder, we do know that there is another aspect of the rift between the father and daughter relationship. Leading up to the day of the murders, the father had killed some pigeons that Lizzie was caring for with the same hatchet, ironically, they were murdered with. And leading up to it, there was also a robbery that did they blame Lizzie for it? Is that what?
Yeah, so the Borden home was robbed, and they accused Lizzie of it because she had previously been accused of shoplifting.
Oh, okay. So troubled past. So leading up to that day of the murders, there were a couple people in the house. There's the 2 victims, Andrew and Abby Borden. There is Lizzie, who is in the house. Emma had left to care for an ill person of some sort, so she was not in the house. Maggie was the maid who also was at the house, and there was a man named John Morris who was a businessman visiting, so staying at the house. That night before, they had all kind of taken ill, assuming it was food poisoning. Was it? I don't know. There's an indication that the stepmother said that it was suspected poison, but it was also 1860, what was it,
1862?
92. So, it could have been probably anything. So basically what had happened was they ate breakfast. Andrew left to go check on business. John went to go run errands. Abby asked Bridget, or Maggie, to wash the windows. Andrew returns home, and Bridget has to let him in because there is an issue with the door being locked or broken or something, so she let him in.
So with the locked doors, because of the prior robbery that the Bordens faced, they decided to start locking all of the doors. Another important note I'd like to mention too is when the maid is outside, Lizzie notes to her that she does not have to lock the back door, even though that's a staple in the Borden house.
Okay.
And so that's why the maid had to come in and let
Yes.
Mr. Borden in.
Yes. He then went to go into the sitting room to take a nap. And then at some point, Maggie does decide to go upstairs to, the attic? That's where she lives, to take a nap. And this is where Lizzie at some point yells, Maggie, to come down quick because, and go for Dr. Bowen as soon as you can. I think father is hurt. I believe hurt would be an understatement considering the 20-something hacks to his brain. So.
Yes, very much an understatement.
So it is obvious that the police need to be called. And a doctor's probably not needed. So they call the police. The police start to do a search because they believe that some murderer is on the loose, which the neighbor comes to help aid in the search. She goes upstairs in the house where she discovers Abby laying face down in a pool of blood, obviously deceased. So what there is something to note is that the body of Abby was cold while the body of Andrew was warm, which means, some time had passed between the two murders. Correct. Yes. Which kind of helped the police understand, well, this was probably not someone from the outside who came in and left. So then authorities obviously switched their focus to inside the house, which then they also decided that they were going to focus their attention on Lizzie, the youngest daughter, would be the primary suspect. So basically the timeline of the murders and the fact that only Lizzie and the housemaid Bridget were in the house, it seemed that neither one of them had saw anyone else in the house. So it seemed that it was around 90 minutes between the two murders. And then 2 days after the murder, Eli Bentz, a clerk at S&R Smith Drugstore, told police that Lizzie visited the store that day before the murders and attempted to buy prussic acid, which is a deadly poison that could kill anyone with a very small dose.
So not great for Lizzie.
No, not looking great. What also should be noted, I guess, is that the police concluded in their investigation that there was no blood, no murder weapon, no clothes that had spots of blood on it from anyone else. So it's very odd that there's no trail.
Right, with
no real evidence.
Murder.
Yes. The police found that Lizzie was unconvincing based upon the fact that during the 15 minutes when her father was murdered, she was out in the barn looking for irons for an upcoming fishing excursion. Yet she had not fished in 5 years. Basically, they would like to charge Lizzie with this crime. So let's go to the inquest. Here we go.
Okay.
What is an inquest?
I don't think we really use those anymore, but a long time ago and in other countries, they're usually called a coroner's inquest. Right now we just let the coroner do it. It is usually to determine if a death was foul play or natural causes. They're clearly not doing that here though. Usually it's just like call people in and figure out what happened and see if they need to refer it to the police. I don't think that's what they're doing with our friend Lizzie, though.
I was going to say, that would have been something that happened if they happened to have been poisoned, though. That would be something.
It's if there's some question, if we need to figure out more about what's going on, but we know an axe bashed their skulls in. Like, there's no question that this is a homicide.
Yes. So why do you think they did that?
I think, from what I've read, that they didn't have enough evidence, so they were like, let's bring Lizzie in, let's see if we can just get her to tell us what happened, we can close up shop, go home for the day if she confesses to the murder, and we'll be done. But that's not exactly what happened.
No. And by the way, it does say here in my notes that Lizzie had been taking morphine, a highly addictive sedative, since the murders. So that can also be attributed to what, like delusions, memory loss.
It was prescribed by her doctor, a double dose of morphine.
Yes.
So Lizzie's called in, she's on morphine, she asks for a lawyer, she's denied. She's not told that she doesn't have to talk to them, that she has a Fifth Amendment right to silence. So all sorts of not good things are happening with this legal proceeding already. We're
Miranda
starting
was not present for Lizzie.
No.
No. I mean, they wouldn't have called him Miranda then. But yeah, they didn't tell her.
Long time coming. So basically, let's jump to the grand jury.
Right.
That
One more thing. So she doesn't actually give any conclusive confession in that inquest either. She gives a lot of contradictory statements, but again, our girl is high.
Yes.
So we can't take anything she says as fact.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So they probably didn't get what they wanted. So then they bring it to the grand jury. And it does say here at first, the grand jury met after first refusing to issue an indictment. The jury reconvened and heard new evidence from Alice Russell. She was a family friend who stayed at with the Borden sisters following the murders. So Russell told the grand jurors that Sunday following the murders, she had witnessed Lizzie burn a blue dress in the kitchen stove while allegedly covered with old paint. But it is noted that this was also done in full view of the police who were surrounding the house and could see in the windows. It also says that there was earlier testimony from Bridget Sullivan that Lizzie was wearing a blue dress the morning of the murders. And this testimony conveyed to the grand jurors to indict Lizzie for the murder of her parents. Dun, dun, dun.
There's other sources too that claim that the dress had been hanging in a clothes press when the police investigated the house, so it had been out in the open for the police to see. And later Emma had mentioned seeing the dress in the clothes press. She said, "You have not destroyed that old dress yet, why don't you?"
Yeah, because there's a murder going on.
We're kind of busy here.
Which is also weird. So that's like a weird thing to say. But
It is a really weird thing to say. But it's also really weird. So in Innocence Project cases, a lot of the times you'll see they don't have enough evidence and miraculously somebody comes forward with a story that's not physical evidence. It's, oh, somebody told me they did it, or, oh, I also saw this thing. And so red flags going off for me as former defense attorney, but it apparently was enough to...
And the police, I feel like, didn't really do a great job in this investigation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But, you know, so them not seeing her burn a dress or care about that is probably, doesn't mean that was okay.
Right.
That was
also,
the right
if that
thing
is
to
the
do.
dress, that's very ballsy if she's burning it in front of the police.
Yes.
That's
right.
hardcore.
Right.
Another thing I thought was interesting was the fact that the dress was blue, and so prussic acid is also used to dye fabrics blue and used in laundry to help boost those colors back to their normal state. So either it was a coincidence or a cover-up.
And that's a good point that the acid is used for other things.
Yes.
It's not just like rat poison or something used just to kill things. It had other purposes that could be explained.
Right. Or could have been an alternative way to get rid of something.
It also kills people.
Yeah. So, all right, so we'll jump to the trial. The trial, it begins June 5th, 1893. And it's a panel of 3 judges. I don't know if that's normal for that time frame or just because the severity of the case. But it was the dream team that was defending Lizzie, including Andrew Jennings, George Robinson, the former governor of Massachusetts, and District Attorney Knowlton, and Thomas Moody argued the case for the prosecution. Moody gave the opening argument for the state. During his argument, he moved items to the table, causing the skull of Andrew and Abby Borden to be revealed. The sight of her parents' skull caused Lizzie to fall, basically faint, for several minutes, and they had to use smelling salts to get her to wake back up.
That's a wild tactic. Whether
Does
she
that
did it or
happen today?
No. No, you cannot put somebody's dead father's skull on the table in front of them. No.
Yes.
I feel like that'd be an instant mistrial. I could be wrong here, but
yes.
That's...
Yeah, and also just like, why would you? I feel like that is kind of telling, like, her reaction, right? Like, if she had remorse or not remorse, or if she did it or didn't do it, that's kind of like, would you faint? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know if you're willing to chop up your parents how the skull would impact you, because we don't know.
The skull's going to make you faint. Yes.
And the other question is, it was a long time after the initial murder that the trial took place, and so was she still on morphine at the time?
Yes, because you're right. It's addictive and opioid.
And opioid addiction was like a big thing after the Civil War as well.
So what are your thoughts on this trial? I want you, you spearhead this part.
First of all, I'm always happy when we get a fair trial. It sounds like she had great representation. The judges seem to make really good rulings. Again, when I say really good, I've only been a defense attorney, so I am biased, but I'm being very clear about it. It seems like she got her day in court. So if she's a suspect, great. Let's see what the state has. Let's put it on. Let's see if we can get a conviction. And it sounds like it was a very entertaining trial for everyone. There were so many articles being written. People were following along. Just everybody invested in it. So I think it's a very interesting trial. Interesting facts. A jury of 12 men, because women couldn't be jurors at the time. So another thing to consider.
Yeah.
These aren't necessarily her peers, because there's nobody like her on the jury. So that's always a wild card.
Good point.
Yeah. The trial took place in another town, which was known to be different religiously and background-wise than the town that the murder took place in, as well.
Yeah.
So not necessarily her peers.
Yeah, no. So it makes it extra interesting when you think about there's no way that people who were in her situation could be judging her. It's going to be men she doesn't know, who have no real insight into what it's like to be a woman in 1892.
So a woman being put on trial in and of itself, I think, is a huge, unique situation.
Absolutely. And killing your parents, and providing for you. I think she's 33 at the time.
Yeah.
So everything about this case is not the norm. I
would assume they probably had it in their heads before entering what their outcome was going to be, but maybe not though, because we haven't gotten there yet.
Another interesting, as part of not being a jury of her peers, the fact that she was 30 and also unmarried at the time.
Also interesting. Which also makes me think if they were going into it with a preconceived notion that they would not think well of this woman. What's wrong with her that no man wants to marry her? Layers upon layers on this one.
All right, so I want to just kind of go through some of the witnesses and what they had to say, and how would this translate in today's trial standards. So witness, surveyor Thomas, Kirian, he testified to measure the house, measurements in the house. So basically, he was taking measurements of the closet to see if someone could fit inside the closet, waiting to leave, hide, go back and forth. Which it was. It was large enough to hold someone to stand in there.
I think the state put themselves in a bad position and had to bring in witnesses that are doing kind of unusual things like measuring a closet, because they can't really prove Lizzie did it. So they've put themselves in a place where they have to prove somebody else couldn't have done it, or could somebody be hiding in this closet? Could somebody have been out around and snuck in and done this? So they've really just boxed themselves into where they have to explore weird avenues that if this were a trial where there are evidence, we could just be going through it, but instead we're going down these weird winding roads.
Right. That, and with the medical examiner basically saying that it is possible that a woman could have killed Abby and Andrew with a hatchet, but they would have had to have been standing in a stance where their legs were standing over the body, which in that time frame is unique because that is not the norm for a woman in the 1800s. She would never have really stood like that, and even horseback riding, they would always have their legs sideways. So to have a woman have to hold stance like that over, I don't think that's a natural process for someone in that time frame.
Right, in a dress.
In a dress. Yes, and have no blood.
Right. So yeah, lots of interesting, weird things to consider that aren't really evidence.
No,
because we don't have any.
Right. They really didn't find anything besides the head of the hatchet. And there was discrepancy between an officer saying that he did see a piece of the handle of the hatchet and then put it back. But it's, nowhere to be found. So what is it like to be in a trial where there's no definitive murder weapon, or it has been destroyed essentially?
Right. So bad idea if you're the state, and usually they have time to get their case together. It's a bold choice, but back then they would have less tools to work with to figure out if there had been DNA on it that were washed away, that kind of thing. But for them to not definitively find the hatchet with blood on it in this very gory crime scene is very interesting. As a defense attorney, you want that. You want them to not have anything.
Right. Well, because they do have I think they do have the head of the hatchet, but it never had any blood on it or anything. So can you definitively say that was the murder weapon? Which they did put the blade into the skull, which it fit, and the defense actually did try to use that to their advantage, saying, well, like any hatchet would fit. And so they did bring in a different one and it did not fit. So that didn't bode well for the defense team there.
And that was that was a real glove doesn't must acquit moment, but in reverse. But axes aren't unique, so it's possible there were tons of other axes and hatchets that would have fit. So if they'd done a little bit better job finding one that did, that could have really helped. But
not to mention too, if this was an old hatchet that had been used by the family for a while and they brought in a brand new hatchet, it wouldn't have had the same profile as the used hatchet because it would have been worn down over time.
Right.
Very good point.
Right. So with all this inconclusive evidence and all of these statements by all these different witnesses, there was no direct connection between Lizzie and the crime. So at the end of the day, the verdict was, you want to give it away?
So she's acquitted.
Yes.
And she had really good attorneys, which is what you absolutely should have going into court. So they did things like excluded that evidence of her attempting to buy the poison the day before.
Yes.
The court said that was more prejudicial than probative. The jury can't hear about this. So that's a major win. The jury doesn't hear about this.
And that happens all the time here in today's world as well.
That's still the standard.
Any prior, prior convictions can't be used against you, or anything prior that might not have anything to do with what's going on in the moment of the case in front of you cannot be used.
Right. If it's something that the jury hears and that's going to stick with them and they're going to think about that and think this is the type of person who's doing crimes, that's more prejudicial than probative. They don't need to know about the poison. The parents weren't poisoned.
But I always find that so interesting, because how is that not a part of the story? It could have been premeditated, but there's just no,
That's a wild switch to go from poison to axe murdering, though.
Yeah.
So I think the court got this one right. I think when you get it closer, when it's not such a stark contrast, that maybe the court can make a different decision. But I think that is the correct one here.
Yes.
Again, they weren't poisoned. Maybe they were on that other time. But again, bad facts that we're not considering right now.
Yeah.
So poisoning, attempting to purchase it the day before an axe murder occurs, not related.
Not to mention that the illness that they had occurred before she attempted to buy the prussic acid.
Correct. So if she had poisoned them before, she would have already had poison. So our girl's looking more innocent as we go on.
So do you think that this is a issue of the state not providing enough evidence? Where is the state going wrong? How did this case fall apart?
Right. Well, I don't think they had a case, and I think that's the problem. That they didn't have any way to prove, other than it was probably her. That's not good enough. That's not good police work. You really have to show the jury why this person committed this very serious crime if you want to put them in prison forever.
Right.
I'm glad that's the standard.
Yeah.
They should have to show exactly how she did this and why they believe and why you can convince me she did this terrible act, killing her parents with a hatchet.
Right.
Do you think that the intense profile of the case and how widespread it was, people knowing about it, do you think that pushed the state along to kind of try and get this trial over and say they want to know what happened, and that might have been where they tripped?
I think it usually does. That happens a lot. With the high-profile cases, you can see the state knows that they think that they have their guy or girl. So they're ready to go, and they've seen enough. They think you should see enough too. But a lot of times when they present it, it falls flat, and we're all watching, especially now we can watch on TV. Convince me. You have to convince me.
Yes.
And they can't do that. So, yeah, bad police work here, even by 1900s.
18 something, yeah.
19th century standards. They didn't do what they needed to do. If she's the only one in the house and has committed this gory crime, there should be evidence.
Right.
Either they didn't find it or she's a criminal mastermind, but only did this one time.
Yes. And what's interesting, and we kind of forget about, there was no CSI. There was no, you couldn't necessarily learn these things from other platforms to then, become this criminal mastermind. No one's thinking this, right? In those times, you wouldn't think. So it would be harder, I feel to get away with what she would have gotten away with.
I agree. How would she know where to get rid of things or...
Right. Yeah. Or store the blood, or you know what I mean? What the police would look for in an investigation. So I find that interesting.
Same.
I don't know.
Also, the lack of real motive. Mm-hmm. You also have to not only show me she did it, but show me why she did it. Why do you think she committed this terrible crime? That's such an unfathomable thing to think about, somebody doing to their parents. So
conspiracy theory, though. What if it was them all involved? What if it was the maid? What if the maid did it?
I mean, it'd make more sense if you had somebody cleaning up and somebody disposing of things. I realize there's
and a delay of police showing up. Anything could have happened.
Yeah. I know it's a conspiracy theory, but it does make more sense to have more than one
person.
Yeah, than this one 30-year-old woman who...
Yes, with a 90-minute intermission between murder 1 and murder 2. So it's odd to me, but I don't know.
And she has neighbors who noticed a commotion when the police were there. So
but not before. So there's no noise, no one screamed for help, nothing like that. It just seems something's not adding up.
No, it's a real mystery.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, with Maggie, the thought of Maggie being involved because she was an Irish immigrant that they hired, and so we don't know how, during that time period, Irish immigrants were definitely kind of looked down upon in society, and they even mentioned that the police that came to investigate were partially Irish immigrants, and Lizzie didn't like that either, so maybe Maggie...
that's interesting.
Maggie wasn't treated well in the household, if that's what she thought of these Irish immigrant police officers.
Right. That's a good point as well.
Very good point.
All right. Well, what are your thoughts? Do you think she's guilty or not guilty?
I think the jury got it right. I think they definitely didn't prove their case.
Yeah.
I've not seen enough, and obviously we're so far removed from it.
Yes.
And we're just getting filtered information at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think Lizzie did it.
Okay. I feel I don't think there's enough evidence to convict her, but do I think she could have done it? Yes.
Alone, though?
No. So
that's where you can get me.
Yeah.
Maybe she's in on it.
Yeah.
Do we think the sister might have had any outside involvement? Because there was clearly after the murder took place, and there's the distribution of the father's wealth afterwards, there had been arguments between Emma and Lizzie about that and who was getting what and how much, and
when they lived together for a while after Lizzie was acquitted, so they were apparently on good terms. So she didn't feel in danger with Lizzie.
Yeah. The other thing is that I've noticed is that some articles will place Emma as noting as like a kind of like a mother to Lizzie. Ever since their actual mother's passing, they had like such a close relationship that she was considered like a mother and had to watch over Lizzie a little bit.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I guess we'll never know. This just may forever be an unsolved mystery.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part.
Yeah. You would think, well, unfortunately, I wish you could like figure out different DNA to grab, but it's probably disintegrated at this point. I mean, there's probably nothing to test.
Well, the only thing I was thinking is, I can't remember when exactly fingerprinting became a thing. Because I want to say it was around it may have been a little later than this case, because I want to say early 1900s is when fingerprinting became a thing.
What would you fingerprint? The hatchet?
Most likely, yeah.
But she's going to be all over that. It's her hatchet.
Yeah, well, that's another interesting part of the fact that the handle wasn't there either.
Right. And that's probably why, because whoever did it probably got rid of it. But
Yeah.
well,
Did they dig up anything in the backyard? Is the hatchet back there?
I don't know. It's a museum. Someone go.
I feel like somebody's probably taken a metal detector through there, because we're not the
In
only ones.
between
who
the
still
ghost
talking about-
hunts.
Yes.
Yes.
They do that during the day and then ghost hunt at night.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to solve this.
Come on.
Once time travel becomes a thing, we'll ask her.
Yeah.
Oh.